this morning who've really set the scene for the rest of our session and discussion today. I'm now very pleased to turn to the next segment of the event, which will provide an opportunity to showcase how public development banks are putting the objectives mentioned by our speakers this morning into action, and also to define areas of future work and collaboration. Our first panel this morning will discuss a topic that's close to all of our hearts, which is the role of PDBs as investors and investment catalysts for climate change adaptation and mitigation in agriculture. I'm very pleased to welcome this morning the moderator for our first panel, who many of you know, and who you would be very happy to see joining us this morning. So Ms. Geeta Sethi is advisor and global lead for food systems at the World Bank. Geeta, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Ron. It is incredibly humbling to speak after my very dear friend, Gilbert and Alvaro, and equally humbling to moderate such an amazing panel of thought leaders and doers. As Ron said, my name is Geeta Sethi. I lead the food systems transformation at the World Bank. And today we meet here to discuss an issue that sits at the heart of our development agenda. A food system that is able to meet the challenge of feeding 10 billion people without encroaching on land and reducing carbon footprint. It is a very sobering picture that food insecurity is significant, and there's a high risk of food insecurity getting worse before it gets better. And it's most acute in countries experiencing conflict and climate impacts. When people are hungry, forests tend to burn, rolling back environmental gains. Current food system production is destructively impacting planetary boundaries. It threatens climate stability and ecosystem resilience and constitutes the single largest driver of environmental degradation and transgression of planetary boundaries. We talked about the role of public banks in mitigation and adaptation. And the agenda is so important and so timely, particularly given business as usual. Our food systems will contribute 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And today's food systems imposes high cost to society. These numbers you all know. The recent estimates suggest that the hidden cost of the food system is about $12 trillion, and the market value is 10 trillion. And left unchecked, this increases to 16 trillion a year by 2050. And in addition, the public support to agriculture is about 600 billion globally, and it goes into programs that is not very conducive to having a planet that it doesn't get violated. So with that background, let me start with our speakers today. It is my pleasure to first start with Alberto from CGIAR. And Alberto, given the importance of this agenda, the role of mitigation and adaptation in addressing climate, but also inducing the kind of investments, what is the thought of CGIAR on evidence? What do we know? What don't we know? What more needs to be said? Over to you. Alberto, I think you are mute.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Brilliant. Sorry for that. We know that around $300 to $500 billion a year are needed basically to transform food and land systems. As you were describing before, very well, around 600 billion go into food systems, but are not necessarily as conducive for climate environmental gains as we would expect. We know also that around 135 million in 2019 where people were facing food crisis, and we're expecting due to COVID around 265 million in 2020 to be facing food crisis. So we just see in terms of evidence, the recent report of the supporters of Agricultural Research Foundation that CGR investments over the past 5 decades of $60 billion in present value terms has returned tenfold benefits. That basically gives us a benefit cost ratio of 10:1 to understand what the true potential of agricultural research can be. However, high-income countries have scaled back that support for both national and international agricultural research and development, and the proportion of gross domestic research and development spend going to the agriculture and food sector, food systems, has declined from around 8% in 1981, to give you an idea, to around 5% in 2015. That same report from the Supporters of Agricultural Research Foundation estimates that at least we need to double public investment in national and international agricultural research and development to basically reduce food insecurity and poverty. So the position of the CGI is that science can actually be very instrumental in supporting public development banks. There are 4 main areas of work that we see that would have true potential. The first one would be around developing climate and environmental policies and strategies that can be mainstream in the risk management, investment decision, and capital allocation processes. The second one is around working with public development banks to co-design innovative investment solutions and vehicles that can help leverage private capital at scale. We're actually doing that with asset managers, asset owners, and being able to unlock so far around $300 million on private capital. The third one would be around providing scientific advisory services to ensure that positive climate adaptation mitigation outcomes are achieved. That goes from supporting the identification of new green investment opportunities to better assessing and managing risk, building the capacity of borrowers and investees, and also developing and monitoring impact frameworks. And then the last one is what perhaps is most widely known about the CER, which is providing science, research, and data to ensure that PDBs can actually operate more efficiently in least developed countries, but also in developing countries and emerging markets, while ensuring climate positive outcomes.
Thank you, Alberto. I want it'd be nice to have a conversation as best as we can with the Zoom. I want to turn to Alan for a second, considering that you all have done a lot in terms of the green bond and so on, and some very innovative instruments. I'd like you to react a little bit to what you hear from Alberto in terms of the kind of evidence that CGIAR has been putting out, and how that has helped in developing the market for more innovative financing, and also being able to provide some de-risking.
Thank you very much, Gita. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. We really welcome this timely high-level dialogue, and it's a great opportunity for our institution, FIRA, to share some of the actions that we have done, particularly in the sense that you are pointing out right now, Gita. First, let me start with what do we think is the position of a PDB in this framework of the climate change, and how can we help? And I would like to set some steps of a strategy that we have followed that have been instrumental to achieve these objectives. And I will start by saying that the green bonds and all this involvement of the investment community is only one step that we consider important. Well, there are 2 steps before that need to be done in order to impact and open this market fully. And this is what we have called a 3-step approach, which is an approach that is called do no harm, do good, and involve approach. And what do we mean by these three words? First, a do no harm approach implies the development of an internal governance framework that aligns our institutional efforts to refrain action that impacts the climate negatively. So you have to start with the house in order, and this will need a methodology that is consistent with the Equator principles. So You need this methodology to identify, measure, mitigate, and report climate-related risk on your daily activity. So that will be a first necessary step to achieve these goals that we are talking today. The second one is to do good. What do we mean by doing good? Well, we do this by developing a positive strategy of funding projects that bring solutions to climate-related problems and make them reality. Here, we have done an extensive study of technologies that benefit the climate. We have had great partners in this endeavor. The Agence Française de Développement has helped very much to select and group activities that would do very well to the climate, and has helped us associate with the Sustainable Development Objectives. This has also helped to develop some tools to measure the impact on climate of our activities. So we have grouped some concepts like climate sustainable agriculture, efficient use of water, renewable energies, and the efficient use of energy as activities that must be developed. And we have used our instruments such as the funding and guarantees to make them more attractive as compared to other traditional technologies. So by developing this strategy along with the AFD, we have done a positive campaign that we think is doing good for climate change. And finally, the third one is the one you were pointing out, which is involve. Try to involve to extend knowledge and awareness of the size and nature of the problem, not only with financing partners, but society in general, and more particularly, the professional investment segment of society. And for this, we have found the green bonds a very important instrument. These green bond emissions we have done for $500 million approximately. And what we do is we try to tag each one of the issuances of debt that we have done with certain particular objectives, such as reduction on CO2 emissions or saving water, which we are able to make an account on savings, and we share with the investment community. We also have a responsibility, we believe, to try to make other participants in our financial system to do the same. We have shared technology so that they can go through the process of issuing green bonds and make this an asset class in Mexico. We believe that there is a strong link between this action and the ESG principles that have become a very important rule with very large investors. So PDBs are in an excellent position to lead the ESG transparency that is needed for investors to look at this segment and bring the money to finance these type of concepts. There are several gaps that we found in these three dimensions, but I will leave this for a next intervention. Thank you, Gita.
Alan, thank you so much. You allude to some very powerful thoughts. Collectively, the strength of the PDBs is about over $2 trillion. And the size of the problem that many reports suggest is to transform the food system is between $300 and $350 billion a year for the next decade. With that context, Anya, GCF is such a ray of hope. I know it went through some humps, but it will be fascinating to see where we are today in terms of GCF's ambition to address food systems and emissions. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Gita. So, you know, let's not be in any doubt as to the scale of the problem we're facing. 2020 is yet again the hottest year on record, now the 5th year in a row. We have yesterday Vietnam was hit by Typhoon Molave, which is one of the strongest typhoons in decades. But what is even worse is it's the 4th tropical storm to hit Vietnam, central Vietnam, in less than 3 weeks. This is completely unprecedented. So it's unleashed torrential rain onto already saturated slopes and soils, unleashing mudslides. 1.5 million people are having to be evacuated in central Vietnam, 700,000 livestock lost. 150,000 people have lost all of their livelihoods, plus the stores that they have saved up because the rice harvest had just come in, and that's just now been lost, and they will require food assistance. So climate, I think, is impacting all of our operations more and more dramatically at the same time, of course, as countries and small and medium enterprises, and the private sector is facing dramatic financial challenges because of the COVID pandemic. So I just wanted to say that to reinforce how we accelerate to scale up action. There's an urgency here. There's a timeline that we all need to work along. And the Green Climate Fund is very, very proud to be working together with IFAD, together with IFD, partnering in these initiatives, co-financing projects, but then also helping to try to think through how the global financial system can really help to absorb and develop new instruments to tackle these terrible challenges that we're facing. So it's about creating transformative climate investments with development co-benefits. And it's about really integrating climate risk into financial decision-making across the board. GCF currently has a portfolio of $6.2 billion under implementation, 143 projects in 106 countries. Of those, approximately 1/3 are agriculture and food related. Very specifically, the projects that are actually labeled agriculture in our portfolio, it's about 1.1 billion worth of specific agriculture projects, of which 73% are adaptation and 27% are cross-cutting, tackling both adaptation and mitigation issues. So having said that, what are we doing with the public development banks? We have 39 public development banks that are accredited entities with us in the same way as with us. So we have these 39 banks that we work with at a national level, at a regional level. And I'm very proud to say that for the working together with the IDFC and aiming for the Finance in Common Summit, there is a climate facility which will be announced at the Finance in Common Summit. This is an open secret. The aim is really to support the members of the IDFC to further integrate climate change into their mandates, to develop innovative financial products, to mainstream climate finance into their operations, and to promote knowledge sharing. So of our public development banks who are accredited to GCF, 13 of those are also IDFC members. So with this subset of 13 IDFC members, we will be really developing closer and closer ties. And yeah, perhaps I'll stop there because I have a couple of examples of really innovative projects that we are doing with public development banks, but perhaps I can come back later with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anya. With that, let me turn to Malik. I know that under your leadership, there's been a lot of very innovative work being done on adaptation, and which is as important as mitigation for many of our countries and citizens. So we would love to hear from you, Malik. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. Before going through the topic, let me congratulate first FIDA, the president of FIDA, IFD, and all the team of IFD. Also, thanks to Mr. Ryu, the CEO of IFD, is a close partnership of the Banque Agricole of Senegal. And we work together for long years in Senegal River at the North region. Thanks also for all the stakeholders associated of these events, especially for my colleague from Africa. I see John, who is with us, and from Africa, Mr. Das Prasoon, and my colleague from Alide also. We share another organization which is called SICA. Thank you for inviting us, for the honor you've given us to participate on this useful topic and useful discussion. And we want to share with you what we are working on the ground at the level of the nation of Senegal, in our country, which is in the situation, geographical situation, very critical position in the Sahel. And we look at last years that we have some difficulties. For example, rainfall are decreasing, soil fertility is losing. We also look at temperatures is increasing. All these aspects affect our agriculture production performance. That's why La Banque Agricole is really oriented risk management and initiative these last years to be in a process accreditation with GCF Climate Fund. Why agricultural banks activities now and in the future are strongly linked to climate change? And we try to answer to this question. We are able to say that particularly in Senegal, for example, we have many persons, at least 60% in the rural area are in agriculture, in livestock, in fishery. And this is very important to tackle how we can do to facilitate financing of these sectors. And this is a problematic. And in our goal, we have just to do all we can to mobilize financing resources and to go through the land and to finance these small farmers and small entrepreneurs. And we look at some challenges, some difficulties. For example, agriculture is drive growth and create jobs in rural area, mainly for women and young people. And you look at in the actuality that young people wants to go to Europe, and they take most risk to go through the sea and try to join Europe, and they think that in Europe they have job is available. Why do they not want to stay here in Senegal and to work in agriculture? Our conviction is that it is more important to do all what is necessary with the public sector and the private sector and all the members, all the initiatives, all the entrepreneurs to do all what we can do to explore, to go to the land, to do agriculture in the good sense, and we will create job for the person. And we also look at that pandemic COVID-19 is also another difficulty, and the complexity of all these crises impose nothing that we have to adapt our strategy and to be responsible in our action. And that's why La Banque Agricole is in the new strategic evolution to tackle this kind of And we go with some partners like IFD, European Bank, and Badea Bank, and also some partnership from Europe. And at this time, what we know that is climate threats on the agriculture sector and adaptation measures proposed in the national plan focuses that we have some challenges, some difficulties to tackle. Particularly, for example, I said that in soil fertility, in agriculture production, we have vulnerability of population, mainly small farmers, for example. And the contribution of the agriculture sector is in GDP is very important, and we look at that we have some problems. That's why we have adopted some measures like sustainable land management. We use adapted and short cycle varieties, for example. We strengthen resilience to food and national insecurity diversification, water control, and use also climate information and management, climate risk and disasters. Promoting also agriculture insurance. We have partnership with the national company which work in insurance in agriculture. And what are challenges and opportunities of agriculture banks in adaptation financing? We think that we can make a strong partnership with the public sector in terms of to look at the challenges we have also in our nation. Is we have systematic integration of sustainable management of climate risk in the bank's financing, promoting innovative financing solutions through the development of resilient and diverse products and services to cover the customer needs, and develop constitutional credit lines and resources strengthening facilitate access to finance small farmers and rural households. What are funding opportunities we have? Growing energy needs to agriculture production and transformation, restoration and sustainable management and degradable land, lack in real offers of bank product and services for the promoting of alternative energy in the agricultural value chain, need to for innovative technology and development of digital agriculture services and access system to climate information. Stakeholders capacity building in a specific area related in agriculture risk management. What are our contribution? We try to play a good role, a major role in this context, and our strategy is can be focused on 3 axes. The first one is we work to offer an adaptive financing and commercial products and services to effectively contribute to the inclusive economy, including, for example, systematic use of climate risk coverage mechanism through insurance. We have developed partnership with CNAS, it's a national company. We also establish a leasing window to facilitate the acquisition of agriculture equipment for the production and processing system. We promote the mobile banking through Agricash wallet. We have a wallet to digitalize some payments in the rural area, and also a network extension policy, which is very important for us to be, like somebody said, we are in proximity and in flexibility. The second axe is to strengthen the partnership. This is very important for us. We promote an additional financing line to facilitate access to credit for small farmers. Promote also an agriculture and rural entrepreneurship based on the intelligent synergies between farming and environmental friendly agribusiness, promoting of gender in agriculture. Current initiative in green bonds issue to support financing of green projects. This is a discussion we have with GCF and scholarship in the UMI zone. Opening up the bank's capital to strengthen our resources. And the third axe is climate finance development. meaning that we promote a private investment on climate as GCF delivery partner for readiness. And we develop also a strong dialogue with the national private sector on funding opportunities for projects related to GCF accreditation. Development of climate impact assessment tools and gender mainstreaming instruments in our funding, and promote our financing and renewable energy in agriculture production and transformation, like solar irrigation, zero emission storage, and transformation infrastructure. Integration of digital technology in the management of climate-related agriculture risk. We work with FinTech, named YAPU project, to digitalize all our process in the credit.
Malik, may I just interrupt you? So sorry. This is very interesting, but we wanted to give others a chance too. So if you could wind up.
One point, blending finance approach is very important also for us. And for the perspective, just let me conclude. We have greening agriculture banks to foster climate resilience and low emission smallholders agriculture in West Africa. This is a project we work with IFAD. This is very important. We have the concept note, it's the regional project, and we are part of this project. Extension in the irrigation solarization pilot in rural area, and solar power irrigation system with GGI. We work in this process, and sustainable waste management project with some partners also, and this is very important. And we are preparing some concept note on the way to strengthen the resilience of the small farmers and access to credit for women and youth. This is what we can share with you. Thank you very much for your attention, and we are available to answer if you have questions. Thank you.
Malik, thank you. This is very, very interesting. And I wanted to open this up now to the agricultural cluster members here today. And what Malik alludes to is also very powerful, that COVID-19 is just a dress rehearsal for climate change. And with that, let me request the cluster members to come in, react, share their own experience, and you can just show your hand feature on Zoom, and also put on your video when you speak. It's open.
I have a brief question to Alberto Milan. As you was talking about the importance of science in delivering sustainable agriculture, and we know the science is there, but the problem which actually I'm facing since last 27 years of my working with the financial sector, being an agriculture, technically agriculture graduate, what I found that this finance and the science, they don't meet, they don't talk each other. And that is what one of the biggest problem what we are finding out, that whatever are the innovations in science are not really disseminated, so that the financial institutions can take those as in face value and also implement accordingly. So what is the CG system's role in this, bringing these two important sector together? Thanks.
What a great question. Alberto, over to you.
Thank you, Ita. Thank you, President. That is absolutely an excellent question. So just to give you an idea of what CGR has done over the last 3 years, we put together a sustainable finance team that I'm actually leading. And what we have is a combination of scientists across CGR centers, so the 15 centers, but also colleagues that come from private equity, impact investing, corporate finance. So we are now a multidisciplinary team that is working basically with international financial institutions, development financial institutions, asset owners, asset managers, and corporates and agribusinesses. And we're basically on a day-to-day working with them. I can give you a few examples of how this is actually working. We supported the design of a $32 million fund in Central America on climate adaptation. This is an asset manager that basically lends capital to domestic financial institutions, and then they own lend to smallholder farmers. Then we also supported another asset manager in Brazil to design a $100 million fund that will be investing in promoting biodiversity conservation and avoiding deforestation. The main focus is sustainable agriculture, so working with SMEs and smallholder farmers. Now we're working in Africa with commercial financial institutions to use science to develop new credit scoring methodology, and that takes into account soil health, water, biodiversity, climate, and the like. So basically, the bottom line is, well, we're also working, I forgot to mention, with another fund manager in Europe, and that is a $200 million fund, all private capital, and we'll be investing in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. It's the first time that we use a science-based food systems approach. So it's a fund that is designed and structured using food system principles, and then basically we'll be working from pre-production all the way to consumption and investing in those SMEs. So what we do basically is bringing all these private sector colleagues and then scientists together in the same team, and then working with at different levels with all those stakeholders that I mentioned, and trying to understand really their needs, and then from scratch designing bespoke solutions that can really target the needs and the challenges they have. So that is we foresee that work obviously expanding because the demand is overwhelming from both, but specifically from the private sector, and there is a really strong interest on the private sector to actually work with PDBs. They see that as a phenomenal entry point. We definitely support that type of approach, and then this is an area that we are expanding over the years and then growing the team to be able to deliver science in a more innovative and better suited manner for financial institutions. Over to you, Gita.
Thanks, Alberto. Any other questions for the panelists, reactions, experiences? Going once, going twice. Alan.
I just wanted to react to the Prasun's question. One way we have gone forward with this is we have installed 5 centers of technology in the country. One of them, actually 2 of them, are promoting technology that help climate. For example, we have one in the state of Guanajuato that would develop all the conservation and agriculture technology, so that we bring all the producers in that region to this center. We have this land that is worked with all these instruments that are necessary, and we transfer this technology so that they can use it. We also have one for feeding cows that has benefits by using certain seeds for feeding the cows, and this is used in the south as a transfer technology facility. So that will be another type of instrument that PDBs can develop, so that these technologies can be transferred to the private sector.
Thanks, Alan. Okay, we're almost close to our closing, and it's been a fascinating discussion. Rapid fire to the panelists, less than 1 minute. And I'll start with Anya. What is the most critical aspect of food finance that needs to still be tackled or scaled up? And that's the question for all the panelists, less than 1 minute, rapid fire. Over to you, Anya. You're mute, Anya.
What I think is absolutely necessary is the sort of mechanisms that Alberto has just been talking about, really developing innovative financing mechanisms to be able to tackle these complex challenges that we're now facing. Grants alone can't do it. Blended finance has just not scaled up quickly enough. GCF, fortunately, is very flexible. We're capital agnostic. is what our ED Yannick Lemerick always says. So, for example, creating first loss guarantees, taking equity in whole new projects and structures that are being created. And again, as Alberto was saying, I think this is very exciting, creating these bespoke solutions for a particular situation. Let me just very quickly give you one example. So the Development Bank of Southern Africa, we are working with them to actually create wastewater treatment plants as a new asset class. And these wastewater treatment plants, there's going to be a lending facility to actually give them very solid financing. So wastewater from 59 municipalities, which will supply then both water and fertilizer to agriculture. But it's a completely innovative financing approach. And we're very excited about these kinds of I think this is, thank you.
Thanks, Anya. Alberto, food finance, what's missing? What needs to be done?
Thank you, Gita. We think really that it's around partnerships. We see a lot of innovation within the private sector. So in terms of securitization and financial structuring, we need to be able to build much more layered capital structures, no? Like bring different types of investors with different risk return profiles, and then be able to, on those bespoke solutions, to put together financial products and investment products that actually work for all the different stakeholders. And then the other area that we see that needs to expand much more is nature-based solutions. Like we're always looking at cash flows or revenues from commodities. And then the food system, as we all know, is incredibly complex. And we can evaluate and monetize ecosystem services as well, so that financial institutions and other financial market participants can actually enjoy those revenue streams. So I'm talking about soil health, carbon, water, biodiversity. We're starting to do a lot of work on that with private sector, and we'd love to expand this area with PDBs, obviously.
Thanks, Alberto. Malik, food finance, what's missing? What needs to be scaled up?
Thank you, moderator. I think that to reach food security in our country, we need at least two things. First, to get public policy very oriented food security. It's very important. And the second is to mobilize enough money. And I think that it is very important for the countries who are in the developing country to mobilize enough money in order to invest in agriculture, because investment is not sufficient. We have to tackle this challenge if we want to get more food to feed all the humanity, because we have challenges. And COVID-19 shows that it is very critical for some countries. When you import lots of your food, in this situation, we face some crisis, and it's very important to be able to give luck to produce all we can produce in our country. And it is possible. I think that this is the way we can tackle food insecurity in the world. Thank you.
Thanks, Malik. Alan.
Thank you, Gita. I think for the same question, we need to involve as much as possible the private sector. Let me give you an example. Every time we come with our methodology to measure climate risks, they will see this as a bureaucratizing of finance. And we have done an extensive job of involving and making aware the private sector about this problem. We are a second-tier institution, so we provide funding. So we can do a positive price discrimination to introduce this type of methodologies and make the private sector aware and use them along with us. We believe that partnership, the same way as Alberto says, it's instrumental with the private sector, but also with the multilateral community, such as today we have had great experiences with a number of multilateral entities such as AFD, the AADB, KFW, and others such as SDG Fund. And this is more like what we call a more than words partnership, because more often we see that they can put funds available to attain these same objectives that we are talking today. Thank you, Gita.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to just quickly close the session and just wrap up. It has been an amazing discussion. And sort of the key takeaways, I think, for all of us is partnerships are incredibly relevant and necessary. And the second is that given the size and the immensity of the problem, no one institution can do it. And therefore, this cross-collaboration, thinking of new instruments, the public-private taking on a new dimension is where we need to put all our energies and really start getting innovative. With that, a very sincere thank you to Courtney and to Ron. And back to you, Ron. It's been a fascinating session.
Very good. Thank you very much, Gita, for your moderation. And thank you very much to all of the panelists for your very rich interventions, whether it was highlighting the importance of policy, the links between agricultural research and finance. I really liked Alan's simple call to do good, and also highlighting the criticality of developing more scalable and innovative financing mechanisms and climate investments with development co-benefits. It was really powerful also the point that Malik made about highlighting that COVID is a dress rehearsal for the future impacts of climate change. So with that, we certainly realize that many of us spend a lot of our lives on virtual calls at the moment. So what we'd like to offer now is a very short 5-minute leisure break. So you can either get a cup of coffee, wash your hands, or just simply take a quick break from the camera. So we will come back in 5 minutes. So if you can reassemble at Rome time at 12:35. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We'll just give another moment for people to take their chairs and ready themselves. Okay, again, let me welcome you back, ladies and gentlemen. We do understand that during the last panel session that there was some issues with the Zoom functionality, and unfortunately, we're unable to see some of the blue hands that were raised during the panel session. We have corrected this, and we'd certainly encourage and invite you to raise your hand in any questions during the next session. So I'm now very pleased to introduce the panel discussion on the role of PDBs in leveraging and de-risking commercial finance. I'm very pleased to introduce my dear friend and colleague, Ms. Azuko Toda, who, as many of you know, is the Director of Agricultural Finance and Rural Development at the African Development Bank. Azuko has generously volunteered to moderate our second panel. So Ms. Toda, the floor is yours. Over.
Thank you very much, Ron. It's really great to be the moderator for this next panel, which I'm extremely excited about. So leveraging commercial lending and the role of public development banks. Just a few housekeeping notes. As Ron mentioned, if people are interested to ask questions, I do believe that particularly for the panelists, we have a blue hand function. So please do raise your hand if you wish to speak. And for all others who have participated or who are participating in the conversation, there is a chat function for which we will be monitoring for questions or comments that are all very important from all participants. And also for those that have a specific question, please do use the Q&A box. And we're very interested to ensure that everybody who is participating has a chance to raise their voice to get their answers questioned if possible. So let me go straight into the conversation, and I'm very happy today to have an illustrious panel. Here we have Dr. Prasoon Das, who is the Secretary General of the Asian Pacific Rural and Agricultural Credit Association, everybody knows as APRACA. I'm very happy also to introduce Mr. Jaffe Justin, the CEO of the Tanzania Agricultural Development Bank. Thank you very much, Jaffe. We have also Mauro Arnaud Matoso, who is the head of the Department of the Agri-Food Complex and Biofuels of the Brazilian Development Bank. Thank you. And we also have with us today Eduardo de Tugendot, who is the Director of Thought Leadership at Palladium. We're very happy to have Eduardo here today, who works with business, governments, and bilateral agencies on their sustainability and business development goals, business goals. So let me start today with the panelists. We have two questions for the panelists, which we'll take in rounds and give each panelist about 2 minutes to answer. The first question is, how can public development banks play a role, a catalyzing role, in crowding in, de-risking, leveraging, and commercial finance for sustainable development objectives? Over to you, Dr. Prasoon first. Thank you.
Yeah. Good afternoon, good morning to all of you. As Ms. Toda already told, that I'm representing the Asia Pacific Rural Agriculture Credit Association. And for you is a disclaimer that we are not a financial institution, but we are the association of the financial institutions in the region. So, and we are here for last 43 years. So we are one of the very, old association working with the public sector banks as well as the central banks. So we work both policy as well as at the implementation level. We do ensure that we support our member institutions to for their enhanced capacity to take the informed decision on investing in the sector with the overarching objective of the sustainability principles. Now to answer the question, I think all of the panelists will accept that the investment by the private sector is enormously important to achieve the SDGs, because it has been accepted all over that it is not the public sector alone can achieve SDGs. So private sector is a very, very important and critical role to play. But at the same time, we work with the public sector bank, public development banks, where we found that majority of them are also playing, especially during this COVID situation and also any disaster or any kind of issues and in the country. They are the key providers, key development initiators. So we know that they provide a long term, because of their structural issues. They are competent to provide long term finance, which help the development of soft and the hard infrastructures in the countries. In basically, if I talk about the region here, we have some of the biggest public development banks in the world. So that what we found, that these infrastructures, soft and hard, are very, very important for the private sector to come in and leverage these infrastructures for de-risking their investments, as well as the financial intervention. However, having said this, there is no silver bullet solution available for de-risking agricultural investments. Nevertheless, range of matching financial products, for example, guarantees, blending, insurance, everybody of us know it, and some business model. It is not only instruments, but the instruments plus business models, which should be matching enough to de-risk this agricultural investment by the private sector. I leave here for the next question.
Thank you, Dr. Prasun. Thank you. We'll move next to Mauro. I like what Dr. Prasun said about leveraging hard and soft infrastructure and the role of public development banks. So Mauro, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank the organization for being here today, this invite to BNDES, the Brazilian Development Bank, and it's an honor for us in BNDES to represent Brazil here in this high-level dialogue. Thank you very much. It's difficult to talk something after Dr. Prasun does. I think that he talked the most important things, so I'll try to say something. But first of all, I think different of Prasun does, we are a national bank, so we work just in Brazil. But we work in, first of all, I think it's very important to have a strong national agriculture policy. This is to give the signals. We have some signals to send to the market. And I believe that the development bank has to assume this role to be the policy implement institution. We have to work this. We have to assume this. So we have to have this policy, and we have to assume this role. And how to de-risk and increase the participation of public, as Prasun said, we don't have agencies around the country. So we need the participation of commercial banks. And Alan Elizondo said something very interesting that we use here in BNDES, the positive discrimination. I think it's important to increase this participation. So we have some contacts with commercial banks, and we give some bonus if they work more with small farmers or cooperative companies. I think it's very important. We have some lines to finance new equipments with small farmers, and always we have to think in long-term terms. Long-term is our role. We have to think the impact in 5 years, 10 years, more of them. I think this is the most important thing to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amado, for that excellent addition in terms of policy and being able to think long-term. Jaffe Justine, over to you.
Thank you so much. As you said, I'm Jaffe Justin from Tanzania Agricultural Development Bank. It's a national bank. We're 5 years old now, and so I agree with the topic which has been shared, and as it has been mentioned by my colleague, us being a public bank, we see that we've got quite a role to play, especially in catalyzing other commercial banks and other players to participate in the agriculture value chain. As you may all aware, for a country like Tanzania, almost 65% of our people are employed in agriculture, and agriculture alone contribute to our GDP more than 25%. So that tells you that we've got huge opportunity, especially in unlocking agriculture. If you look at the banking sector, you would take note that per day, if there are 100 loans which are being issued by the financing or financial sector or the banking sector, hardly 9 loans goes to agriculture. So that tells you that we still have quite a lot to do, especially from their financing, especially the instruments, and also on the policy side on how we can run other financial institutions to come in the picture and finance with us, either through blended financing, co-financing, or whichever instrument. So we as TADB, we have developed our model internally, and we easily use 3 jargons. We say one is mobilize the resources, and second one is deploy the resources, and the third one is recycle the resources. So we design projects either through the bank alone, and then we partner with commercial banks and see the likelihood of them taking these transactions. And once we mobilize the resources, then we go into deploying them. And then we work with the banks at making sure that we provide the credits. And after providing credits, then we make sure that we improve the monitoring part, of which we'll be able to recycle the resources. So I might say that what I should say is what we are seeing is the perception risk, that everybody perceives that agriculture is a risk undertaking, and most of the commercial banks are shying away. But of late, as a bank, we have been able to register or get into MOUs or Memorandum of Understanding with at least 11 banks, of which we do co-financing with them, and some of them we offer guarantee facilities. So we believe over time, we should be able to support even more. And just for the past 2 years as a bank, we have been able to disburse or give out loans of more than $100 million. And we can imagine a growth within 2 years, and our non-performing is quite on the lower end. So we see that commercial banks, after seeing this kind of impact, you now see traction and people are now coming in aggressively. And you look at the numbers back 5 years, hardly you would have less than 6 loans out of 100 being issued to agriculture sector per day. So now we've pushed it to around 9, and we foresee that we should be able to do even more by just coming forward, de-risking some of these transactions, do some feasibility studies, develop business plans, and then bring the banks in the room and really opt for a partnering approach where we see there is more traction coming forward, especially now when people see that agriculture is bankable. Thank you.
Excellent, Jaffe. It's great to hear the progress that is being made, especially through your strategy of mobilizing, deploying, and also recycling resources. I'd like to go next to Eduardo, who will give us really the voice from the private sector. And I know he wants to show us this model also. Over to you, Eduardo.
Great, thank you very much. I represent Palladium, and again, I focus on thought leadership and specifically around a framework we call inclusive growth, which is how to bring together or rethink, especially food and agriculture systems in ways that are investable and basically move from sort of short-term transactional nature of agriculture and natural resources to something that actually creates longer-term confidence among the actors in terms of market access, access to finance, and access to technology. So basically what we've been looking at is either working with trying to help sort of a new type of integrator or catalyst in the system, right? As a way of kind of moving from a system that exists today, which works more or less, but it's not working particularly well for any of the actors, right? It's not working well for the finance because they're still nervous or can't enter cost effectively. It's not working well for technology to get, especially to small scale farmers. It's not working well for the off-takers who have issues with reliability and quality and gradable product. And so how do you kind of re-engineer this system in a way that works for everyone? So again, is this where you want to show the slide now? So we've been working on an approach that tries to bring together these different entities. Basically, it can be through working with an existing company, let's say, that is able to build a bridge between the producers and the other actors in the system. So in a case like Uganda, we've worked with helping traditional trading companies reinvent themselves as supply chain managers that structure something that looks like this graphic. But in other cases, like in Brazil, we're working with some large organizations who are seed funding, basically the idea of a SPV or a project development platform like this. And this platform basically is the one that puts together the different actors, whether it's the large farms and how they work with outgrowers, bring in the finance, bring in the input and technology. But the really important part is the starting with off-takers. So even if you're working in situations, it was mentioned earlier about nature-based solutions where carbon and eco services are important, there needs to be an off-taker that creates value for this system. And so basically we start from the market and work backwards. And it's the long-term commitment by anchor off-takers that de-risks the rest of the system. But of course, putting all these things together takes time and effort, and one has to prove that they work. So one of the great ways that public agricultural development banks can support this is by seed funding facilities that are like this, that are trying to get going and either trying to help local companies become these catalysts, or other groups that are willing to kind of create new kinds of SPVs that bring different actors into sort of jointly owned special purpose vehicles. And I can talk about that more later. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Eduardo. It's so interesting as PDBs have a role in this seed funding when it comes to putting the actors together on platforms. I'd like to move to the second question. Again, each panelist, I will go in the same order and then request you just about 2 minutes in your experience, in your specific experiences. And I know that we have a diversity of panelists here. Please give us an example of where a public development bank or where public development banks have leveraged commercial lending. If you could give us a specific example. I will start again with Dr. Preston.
Yeah. As such, we have many examples, but I would like to go to the Pacific Island because we have some members in Pacific Islands also. So I'll be giving a very classical example, which has been undertaken by the Fiji Development Bank, which is a PDB, and their focus is agriculture. And if they have undertaken an agricultural transformation program in Fiji, for improving their export-oriented commercial vegetables. So what they did is it's a really classic example where they started financing the individual farmers, little bit bigger farmers, not exactly the smallholders, but there is a outgrowers also. The big farmer become the outgrowers. But what happens next is even interesting, that the downstream actors in the value chain, they came in, they started their own, cold chains. Then apart from the cold chains, they have packing houses, so that they export those vegetables, which are commercial and high-end vegetables, to Australia and New Zealand. And the impact of this is that around 500 farmers, I mean the mid-sized farmers, their income has increased many folds, maybe around 200% of their income has increased. So what I'm trying to bring home here is that they started the program, the PDB started the program with certain amount of investment, and then there is a leveraging of huge amount of investment from the private sector, because they could see the business in the horizon. So it is very important that you have, as a private public development bank, you have to showcase the business in the horizon for the private sector so that they can come in. Thank you.
Excellent example. Thank you, Dr. Prasun. Mauro, over to you.
Thank you for the question. Here in Brazil, we would like to talk, just remember, Brazil used to import food in the 80s. 1980s, Brazil was an importer of food. And now we are one of the bigger exporter of food. So it's very interesting to say. And I think it's a result of years and years of a strong agriculture policy, public policy. So in Brazil, we have a good case that we finance new equipments for small farmers. And BNDES works as in a second tier line. And we use our funds to increase the participation of commercial banks in this kind of financing. And we use how we can increase this participation. We use this positive discrimination. I like this expression very much. But we use this positive discrimination to increase this participation. And we assume the risk. It's important too. We assume the long-term risk of this kind of financing. So we give our funds to this commercial bank, then he finance this small farm, and we can use this to finance small farms, and just with small farms. We can finance to cooperatives companies, that is bring small farms together to invest in industrialization, their grains, for example. And BNDES doesn't have bank branches around the country. So we need this partnership with these commercial banks. And we de-risk this, giving these funds, and they can play with the small farmers because they don't need to use their own fundings. So it's a very successful program here in Brazil, and it works for a long time and is still working better. We are trying to look for new ways to support this program because sometimes it's a little expensive, but I think and imagine the increase in the production of this small farm, when he buy a new tractor, imagine. So it's a very important program here in Brazil.
Super, thank you so much, Maros. Nice to hear about a success story. Over to you, Jaffe.
Yes, thank you so much. I'll pick an example from Tanzania. We have a smallholders credit guarantee scheme, of which we partnered with one multinational or multilateral, I should say IFAD. and our bank, TADB. And through this guarantee scheme, we've managed to enroll around 11 banks, as I said. And what we do, we provide a cash guarantee of 50% upfront to the commercial banks. We've got a mix of commercial banks, microfinance, and also some other small third-tier banks. And on the impact, I should say, for just the past 24 months, we have been able to guarantee loans way above $28 million, which means half of it came from a PDB or come from TADB, and another half of it came from commercial banks. And this has managed to impact more than 7,000 farmers. And the beneficiaries has gone far away to more than 730,000 farmers. So for us, this sort of partnership or strategic partnership, we see quite an opportunity and as a critical example. But I just wanted to add another one. We, as a bank, as PDB, we were involved in reviving the coffee value chain in Tanzania, where back in the days, people were not even interested to fund the value chains. Farmers were being paid at least USD 0.2 per kilo. But with our involvement in more than 140,000 farmers, we are currently paying them the farm gate price of around $0.5, which is quite twice of what they were being paid back then. We also invited the commercial banks, and they were being able, after seeing us in that value chain, they've opened account for all these smallholders, farmers, and now we are in our third year. We're planning to exit since the commercial banks have already seen the appetite of one to take over the value chain. So I believe the model with PDB in the picture provide quite a room in terms of de-risking these value chains. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and really exciting about what you've done with Tanzanian coffee farmers. Over to you, Eduardo.
Great. Well, I'll use an example that we started in Peru and Ecuador, but actually we're now working in a program, probably Mauro isn't even aware, but we're working in Pará with some companies around specifically cocoa and agroforestry. And the Banco de Amazonia as an example. So using some of your lines. But the whole idea here is to start with one of the end buyers of cocoa, which is one of the large chocolate companies that needs a long-term, reliable, transparent supply, and getting them to agree to a long-term, and by that I mean 10 to 15-year offtake commitment, because to get trees is a long-term investment. And so we're working with some of the companies on these offtake agreements. In one case in Ecuador, where it includes a floor price, which is very important, which is around the break-even level for an efficient farm, small-scale farm. And so based on this, what we're organizing is a financing through progressive aggregators, and those aggregators are providing centralized post-harvest handling, fermentation, and drying in order to be able to meet a high-quality, fully transparent supply to the end buyer. And by doing that, then we're able to raise both the long-term capex that we need for the planting of the trees and the putting together of the post-harvest centers, as well as the short-term financing, which is needed for the co-ops and others for their year-to-year fertilizers and other inputs. And so basically the way the finance goes through these aggregators, or can go directly to the farmers. But the interesting thing for the finance is that these are pre-qualified farmers, right? Because they're all part of a long-term agreement. And so it bundles it for the financial organization, makes it much more efficient for them. And actually, they get the inputs partly through technology as part of the financing. And then it's the aggregator that actually pays back the bank, right? So there's a triangulation there and a kind of a managing of risks and a managing of results. And they all kind of share in that process.
Very good, very interesting. Well, I'd like to really thank the panelists. I think no one debates that private commercial finance is critical given the scale of the sector and the resources, the innovation, and the competition that commercial investors can bring. And the panelists have helped us to understand how public development banks, PDBs, play a critical role in bridging the diversity of actors, helping to de-risk, crowd in, and align commercial finance. And we gave some really interesting examples of leveraging hard and soft infrastructure, having strong policy that signals the market on long-term conditions, mobilizing resources and partnering with the commercial lenders, as well as special purpose vehicles that can be seeded from PDBs. I'd like to open the next part of the conversation to all the agricultural development banks that have participated in this conversation. I'd like to ask some of the agricultural development banks to switch on their cameras and also to be able to participate in this next part of the conversation. So if you're an agricultural development bank, please switch on your camera. The next question is going to be to you. I know that within the participant agricultural development banks, there are a diversity of agricultural development banks in terms of capital base, in terms of mandate, in terms of instruments. There are some with significant portfolios in agriculture, some that are dedicated to agriculture, some that provide finance to end clients, or as Mauro was saying, to financial intermediaries. There are also PDBs that are retail banks, those PDBs that operate at second tier. And there's different levels of targeting, and some PDBs that focus their portfolios on small scale enterprises, small scale producers, larger agribusinesses, larger investments. So we have a diversity here. But the question that I'd like to ask the agricultural development banks and those that want to speak is about specific models and co-investments that have proven to be the most effective in leveraging commercial lenders, and what were the factors behind that success. For some of the agricultural development banks or the participants who are willing to answer, I'd be very happy if you could just raise your hand and I'll try to pick on you. Okay, I see Francis. Francis, please. Francis Cabore. Oh, Francois, sorry, I didn't pronounce his name correctly. Francois, did I see your hand? No. For those that may be, oh, Alan, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I would like to highlight the model of a second tier institution during an episode such as the pandemic we're living. Obviously, you have to serve the sector, and we have heard very interesting examples from Brazil. And but in an episode like this, we also see that the liquidity in the interbank market and also the liquidity for non-bank banks has failed, and there is a strong need for resources to keep the agricultural sector going. So a second-tier institution can become a wholesale issuer of debt, and in this type of institutions, since they are government-related, they have access to the debt markets. So for us, it has been very important to play that role, to get resources in a very liquid period, and try to make it apparent to all our network of intermediaries that there is money, so that they are not facing this liability side problem. So that will be one model. The other one is to use guarantees and to partner with the local state facilities. So we use guarantees that help bank institutions, private sector players, to provide funding to the financial inclusion sector, which they will not do that without a guarantee or a risk mitigant such as this instrument.
Thank you, Alain. Excellent. Carmen de Leon, s'il vous plaît, from Ban Rural.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we are a different bank. We are part. We have a process. We had a process of privatization of the national bank, and now the result is that this bank is in the hands of cooperatives, NGOs, rural women, and indigenous organizations. So the model is representative of the sectors, and the decisions are collegiate. We work to include those who have been historically excluded from access to banking. So the Ban Rural is a new experience. We are now the second bank in the country, and we have the most amount of access, the most amount of accounts in the country. And there are little ones, and most of them are in the hands of women. So that's, I had a question before for the panelists, but I don't know if they are going to have time, because for us it's very important how to include the women in all the process, and almost in the roof of the process, in the base of the process, because the women are the ones which stay at home, and they are not. For them, it's very difficult to access most of the cases to all the structure of the accounts, or how to open account. So we have to develop a model or a product specific for women, and for women which are rural women. And I don't know if one of the panelists of other banks have some modelics approach of how to include women and youth in all this process of banking. Thank you.
Excellent, Carmen. I really like your question, and I think let's try to answer that first. Does anybody want to try to answer Carmen's question? Plasun, over to you, and then afterwards, Alain.
Yeah, the question raised is very, very interesting, and we have a very good experience, including the IFAD. Since I think in the end of 70s, 80s, we started this program for from APRACA also, along with IFAD, some funding from GIZ, with NABARD, National Bank for Agriculture, Rural Development in India, in VIVARD in Vietnam, also in the Philippines with the Land Bank. So what we found that this if you really go to the there are separate programs, like in Philippines it was the indigenous people, in India it is with the women. So I just want to give you the experiences in India, which if I also know very well, that the self-help group, which was started as a social movement, now it become a financial movement. The program becomes a self-help group linking to the banks. As you are rightly said, that all the women are not, they are not easy with the banking systems and procedures. So these SHGs, there will be some person in the SHG, some women, who will be trained to do the banking business. So there will be a single point or maybe a 2-point interaction with the banks. So that is one of the very successful model. And in India it is around 80 million SHGs are working currently, and out of which maybe around 60 millions are linked with the banking system. Maybe all of them are not working in agriculture alone, but this is a very, very big examples of how the women can be entering into the banking through their self-help groups. I think Ron also know it better because he was one of the promoter of this.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. for this. Alan.
Very quick to come. Carmen, we have a very recent experience in Mexico. We have just issued a social bond with a gender focus. And we actually, this was our way to make the society to turn the attention to rural women. And we issued it the 15th of October, which was the International Day of Rural Women. But the answer to your question, the model that we promoted is to tackle the problems that the rural woman is facing. And we identify the problem by the lack of productive assets of women, the lack of commercial channels that she has to sell her products, the lack of access to workforce, and all these factors make it very unlikely that she will receive a loan. So what we have done is something more than a loan. One thing that is important to say is that you need more than a product, a financial product. You need to cover all these dimensions that I just mentioned. So one of them is we first started by going and involving a large enterprise that will buy those products from women. So we tie them, we bring the women and this large institution together. Then what we do is to provide a loan so that she can buy all the required assets and instruments to develop her crop. Let's think about coffee, for example. So she would get the plants that are genetically fit to provide the coffee for this large enterprise. And we will provide a technical assistance to these women so that they can produce according to the quality standards that this enterprise will require. So you have technical assistance, commercial channel, and a loan. And with that, then you can start a commercial relationship and a path for development for that woman. So we have pulled together something close to $70 million of loans of that sort. And we issued the bond promising the market that we would do another to duplicate this quantity in the next 6 months. So that would be a solution that in Mexico we have followed.
Thank you, Alan. I'm going to ask Eduardo Alvarez. I think you've turned on your camera. I wonder if you're trying to answer the question, which is around the specific examples.
Yes. Thank you for the word. I'm from ALIDE, the Latin American Banking Association from financial institution, and Carmen and Alan are very well, were lovely members of this, and I have very good friends like Presume. And I want to point out the product that just Alan taught has been awarded by ALIDE because it's very, very interesting. And what this is something that differentiates the development banks from commercial banks is that we, the development banks, provide not only money, we provide smart money. It means money with technical assistance. That this is what Alan is been talking about, and is what Prasun has talked about. And we as a network, we're working, and I'm sure that probably in the close future, we're going to have an internship with FIRA, so Carmen can take the real knowledge from the source. It means from FIRA, and I am also sure that the person will provide us all the knowledge he has about this with this his friend association. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eduardo. There was a question also from Sana Altel, which related to this issue of women and youth. And I think Alan and Eduardo, as well as Dr. Prasun, mentioned the importance of things like technical assistance to help, whether it be self-help groups, to be able to target better. Eduardo, I saw you raise your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, also build on Alan's point on sort of, again, connecting the pieces, right? So I think sometimes with women and youth, the question is how they best get integrated into the system. And it is hard for women and youth, especially when they start with no assets. And so one of the ways of doing this is in And there's also recognizing where are the women and where are the youth and where can they best be integrated. So for example, in Ghana, one of the programs we worked with sort of public financing was to almost like get commercial banks but working through what we call facilitators, almost like people that are trying to put together, like especially women and youth SMEs that are in the agribusiness, usually intermediaries or maybe agricultural service companies of various kinds, that are critical to the system, but also lack financing, right? So how to get them into the financing. And so in the case of Ghana, what was fascinating, and I think this is a case study that that I know that we've worked on with Safin before, but this has been really interesting as a way of mobilizing, in this case, about $200 million of financing to women and youth SMEs in the agribusiness value chain, right? And again, one of the keys that can be made even better when it is linked to off-takers is a de-risking. And so basically one of the keys here is to be thinking of these as opportunities where instead of typical banking approaches, which is about, based on collateral, how can you get banks and financial institutions working on a cash flow basis, right? Understanding that these are SMEs with cash flow, and how do you de-risk that? So I think various people have mentioned ways of structuring these kind of things, right? So I think public banks can be very useful on things like first loss mechanisms, guarantees, right? Blended finance of various kinds. But a lot of it really is getting, especially the commercial sources of finance over the psychological hurdle of, but the first point is, a lot of these people are just invisible to the banks. They're invisible to the large companies. So it starts by just understanding where are they? Where are the youth? And actually listening to them, understanding who they are, right? And that's the first challenge, I think, that one has to deal with.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Eduardo. Let me see if we have any other agricultural development banks that want to come in here. I'm not seeing anybody. Okay, so let me just go back to some specific questions that have. Okay, Anil, I see you've switched on your camera. Anil Upadhyay, over to you.
Yes. I'm Anil from Agriculture Development of Nepal. It's a really interesting discussion and feedbacks to us. We are working in this field and providing complete financial service to all stakeholders of the agricultural value chains. Our portfolio agriculture sector is almost more than 1/3 of total portfolio. So we are working from priority deprived sector to value chain stakes all. So there is a specific model for private partnership useful for us. The technology support for digital of agriculture finance is most important. So resource generation to meet the increased demand of the agriculture loan, also the burning issue, and support in issuing green agriculture bond in local level is in every country. It's like our country, we are facing a high cost resource cost financial model. So market driven the rate. So it's very difficult to follow in the agriculture sector. So another is capacity building of the staffs and entrepreneur of agriculture sectors, and promotion of climate smart agriculture lending. So there is a need of policy, the agriculture strong smart policy, public policy, government policy. This floor will certainly help in this area. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anil. I have a specific question that has come off the floor for Jaffe Justin. And this question has come from Banque Agricole du Niger. Jaffe, if you could answer, do the guarantees that you offer as a TADB, does that include seed money to favor the mobilization of resources at a low cost?
Yes, exactly. So when we started, and I'll tend to agree with whoever asked the question, is when we were giving the banks at least 50% cash cover, which is more like a sweetener, our experience were that the commercial banks didn't respond positively because they were still charging the farmers quite a high interest rate. So what we did, we revisited the model and we asked all of them that we are going to put a cap in terms of interest rate of the money we give, and we've seen that being opening up, and there's quite a good attraction. And apart from that, I think to add on the conversation, which was how do we support the startups, how do we support women's and also youth? Currently we're working with some of our big corporations in Tanzania. Let's say John Deere, they've got a subsidiary called Lone Agro. We're supporting farmers with machines and equipment, and we have quite lowered the interest rate because the corporation is providing technical assistance, PDB is providing the funding, and we are not requesting for collaterals of more than 125% as per regulations. But for this one, we're using the asset themselves as collaterals. And also the additional component, which is of more interest for youth and for women, we've got an interest buyback. So you find if interest rate is 12%, then we might find that the deal will end up at 80%, which I believe these are very concessional. So as a bank, now we're aggressively working on how to support youth, especially and women, and create a proper window. And this should be, we believe, on a business development capacity, how we can unlock opportunities, map them with market, and take advantage of this. Because we believe that's a space where we haven't been able to do a lot. And being a DFI, we can take that approach or that risky capital of putting money to develop business cases, showing opportunities, and then bring in partners and do a joint arrangement or joint partnerships.
Thank you, Jaffe. That's very exciting. I'm going to take a few questions from the floor now. So please, participants, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat box or in the Q&A. The first question by Maman Lawal Mosi, and I open this up to anybody who would like to answer. What about the regulation issue? That is to say that agricultural and development banks also need specific prudential ratio limits, and they also abide by specific rules. Have any of the PDBs actually been struggling or have any challenges or opportunities with the regulation issue? Mauro, can I ask you to try to answer that question?
Okay, no problem. Thank you for the question. Here in BNDES in Brazil, we don't have a specific regulation to this kind of investment in agriculture. What we have in some bonds in the capital markets, you have some different rules to some agricultural bonds. You have some specific, but in the bank, okay, here in Brazil, we have a law, regulation that you have to apply part of your funds on agriculture. Yes, you have these, there is some kind of funds of all the banks you have to apply in agriculture. I don't remember exactly which is a percent, but you have this rule. And it helps a lot because they have to put this money on agriculture, and sometimes it has a better price because they have to put it. So instead of pay I think that the money stay in the central bank if they don't use it on agriculture. So it's good. It helps a lot here in Brazil.
Okay. Super, Mauro. Dr. Person.
Yes. Actually, in most of the countries in Asia, except the Philippines, among the bigger countries, the rules, regulations are very clear. If you are a public development bank and your mandate is for agriculture, you must have a 50%, more than 50% of your portfolio to agriculture. If you are a commercial bank, then you have certain percentage of your lending should go to agriculture. Most of the countries follow this particular rule. And as he said rightly, that there is a fund in most of the countries. For example, in India, the fund they call it the Rural Infrastructure Development Fund. So the shortfall amount will go to the RIDF, which is Infrastructure Development Fund, which will help the state governments to build the rural infrastructure or the agricultural marketing infrastructure, which eventually support the private sector entity to invest in that particular rural market. So I think the rules are clear. We have recently done some work on this long-term finance and the regulations of the central banks. And most of the central banks don't want to revoke this rule. They want these rules to be there, and it is really beneficial for the agricultural financing. Yes.
Very good. Thank you so much for answering that question, Mauro and Dr. Preston. I'd like to ask the wider audience if there are any questions, please do raise your hand and we will ask you to ask that question directly. There is a specific question that has come up for Eduardo, the experience in ag REITs and what role he sees that for PDBs. Eduardo, over to you. That was asked by Alan.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And actually, I often use the metaphor of real estate development as a way of thinking about how one can structure some vehicles for getting finance into agriculture. So, and we're doing a number of these around Latin America. We're looking actually at one in Mexico right now, in actually working with communal lands, indigenous lands for reforestation, and then some intensification of the lands. So the idea is if one can have something like, again, I mentioned the SPV, right? Is a financial instrument in Latin America. It could be something like a fideicomiso, right? Which brings together a trust in effect, which brings the financing in, the seed financing, including, and certainly a second story financial institution is ideal for seed funding, something like an SPV like this. And then basically that SPV has a operating arm, which is structuring the actual projects on the ground, right? With communities, the off-takers, and the others, right? So they're the ones that are building the buildings like a REIT would, right? So you have, but what's interesting, what happens to a lot of funds, when funds or bonds get put together, is what they're missing is pipeline. So the key concept here is to make sure that you have, and they sometimes lack the track record to actually raise the funds. So the idea here is start with also make sure you have an off-taker, right? That's going to buy the products or that are getting developed. So you de-risk it, but then you're structuring actual products as projects as you go along. Establish that track record, and then that REIT that you created, right? The SPV can actually then, based on the track record, then raise additional finance in the market, right? So you're raising finance for the individual projects, but you're also raising finance for the SPV over time, right? And that's the idea of how you can achieve scale. So it's an excellent question, and I think it has a huge amount of potential. So if that's of interest, I'd be very, again, we have a specific opportunity. I'd be interested in speaking to you about that.
Thank you so much, Eduardo. Thank you very much. I'd like to leave 1 minute each to each of the panelists to kind of give us one key takeaway for action forward, particularly to highlight to the decision makers in the upcoming Financing Commons Summit. I'll start in the same order that I started, Dr. Preston.
Yes. No, actually, but I mean, what we are discussing, need of the hour is very important that we, for agricultural development, is to walk the talk. By establishing maybe a national level or the regional level framework to adopt the value-added transformation. It is not only transformation, but the value-added transformation by funding the new opportunities of developing high-value and export-oriented commercial crops for the developing countries in the region. See, why I tell this, because you see, big countries, we are always focusing on the big countries, but the smaller countries, they really need a lot of support from the agencies like IFAD or maybe other agencies, and also the networking agencies like us. So our contention is that we need to support the smaller countries to provide them other benefits so that the private sector also can come in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mauro.
I'd like to, I'm very grateful to be here. I think it's a very good panel to discuss these important points. And as sometimes I talk when some internal meetings here in BNDES, I talk to the guys that we have to work like a car. So we divide our team in two groups. One is the machine. So we have a strong agriculture policy in Brazil, and it works for a long time. So we have to act to maintain this car working. So it's the machine, like to finance the new equipments for small farmers. It works for a long time and you have to keep it. And this is the public policy. And we have the lights. Another thing is the lights. We have to look for new experience and try to increase this experience and then put it in the machine together. So now we are trying to look for new technologies, like to produce biogas from the waste agro-industrial. It's a very important thing. And we are trying to use the capital markets to increase the agricultural financial resource. We are trying to think in a way to connect small farmers or medium companies and guarantee their bond emission, or maybe a green bond emission to the capital markets. And BNDES could guarantee this emission. I think this is the role of a public development bank, to be these lights and to keep the machine working. And to keep it, we have to assume some risks and thinking long term. That is the role to increase this participation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jeffy.
All right, thank you so much. One big takeaway for me, it's supporting especially the PDB in most of the countries, especially on developing framework for supporting startups and youth and women, because we believe you've got a very youthful population across, if you look across Africa, and all these people, for us to turn around their lives, partly we need to support them in agriculture. So agriculture investment using startup, which will be seed fund, because most of these projects, most of these commercial crops, you'll find that you'll only be able to start being having cash flows after 4 or 5 years. If you go into cocoa, if you go into let's say cashew nut and all other crops. So startup financing or startup association, startup framework, I believe they'll be critical in supporting both youth and women's. And I believe if this call come across, especially multinations, as PDP, to take the front lead, since the youth are they are no longer the future. These youth are the guys to drive the economies. They are the change of the economies of these countries. So deliberate actions, clear frameworks, I believe those are critical at turning around life of these generations. Thank you so much.
Super. Thanks a lot, Jeffy. Eduardo, for the last.
Yeah, I think, I mean, my takeaway is that, the public development banks play a critical role as kind of a second story catalyst right? So they catalyze systemic change, and that's a way to think about it. But to maximize their impact, what they need to be working with is sort of the retail level catalysts that work more on the ground, right? That are connecting the dots. And if they can be working with these more innovative catalysts on the retail level, right, then that between the two of them can really maximize the sort of system change and impacts that they can have on the ground that it is done in an inclusive way.
Thank you very much. All tremendous inputs for the Financing in Commons Summit coming up, and I believe important inputs for decision makers. It really tells a different story of the financial sector and the landscape to be able to work for the value-added transformation that we all wish for on our continents. I'd like to thank the panelists, really a diversity of panel members representing all continents. Excellent conversation. Really exciting about what the experience has been using different financial products, from bonds to lines of credit, to guarantees, to SPVs, and also the importance of technical assistance to be able to reach women and youth, but listening to them at the beginning, which is the most important point, the critical nature of off-takers to ensure that the value chains are structured. The roles of the banks, the public development banks, in terms of mobilizing, deploying, recycling, as well as strong policy and providing long-term signals to the market, and the leveraging of hard and soft infrastructure so that PDBs can play the role of the second story catalyst, or to maximize impact. For building on your experience, we really hope that this conversation has been exciting for everybody. It really has been exciting for me. Thank you very much, and over back to Ron. Thank you.
Let me also thank you, Ms. Toda, for your excellent moderation, and to the panelists for the engaging and interesting discussions today. From IFET's perspective, I certainly found really interesting that the exchange on women, youth, and who Eduardo mentioned the potential invisible clients for PDBs. And I'm sure this often includes small-scale producers. So I'm sure this has also resonated with the many representatives of farmer, youth, and Indigenous peoples organizations that I know are tuning into our event today. So ladies and gentlemen, we now come to the final session, which is a presentation of the joint statement that the cluster has been developing over the past weeks. And for this, we have Dr. Benita Prato, who is the Senior Coordinator of the Smallholder and Agri SME Finance and Investment Network, or as we all know it as SAFIN. So thank you, and Bettina, over to you.
Thank you, Ron, and good afternoon or good evening, I suppose also good morning, everyone. I believe there will be a presentation coming on the screen on my behalf in a few seconds. Yes, thank you. Okay, as Ron mentioned, very briefly, I coordinate a network of right now 52 institutions from across the globe that work in the area of agri-SME finance. Some of our members are actually on the call or were in the earlier panels. In the past few weeks, it's been my pleasure to support the IFET team in convening and facilitating this cluster of agriculture-focused public development banks. So what I will do in the next 10 minutes or so is walk you through the cluster, what the cluster is about, sort of how we went about facilitating the coming together of this cluster, and the key elements of particularly one of the two deliverables that the cluster has been working on over the past month or two. So first of all, about the cluster, this includes about 20 public development banks that come from different regions and that have mandates that are sometimes agriculture focused, but also sometimes focused more broadly on the rural space. It's quite a diverse group of banks that includes both second tier and more retail level banks. So both the second story and those more closer to the ground, to use Eduardo's language just now. It also includes some networks of financial institutions. It's been working primarily on two deliverables in preparation for the summit. One is a joint statement that I will walk you through in a moment, and that also Alvaro Lario referred to quite in detail in his statement at the beginning of this event. Secondly, we are working together on the design of a working group, or perhaps a standalone forum, on financing sustainable food systems that may have a number of functions still being fine-tuned, and I will also briefly present those shortly. So can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So just brief word about the process and the timeline. In September, IFAD really made the effort to reach out and bring together an initial group of banks to form this cluster. This is an initial core group. As I said, it's about 20 members, but the idea is that over time it will expand and it will be a welcoming home for other public development banks that may wish to join, national, regional, or international. We worked on a concept note. We started drafting this joint statement, and I do want to emphasize here that we've had, I think, a very interesting dialogue, sort of and participatory process with the cluster members around what it is that really brings all the members together. So we had a couple of calls, we iterated the joint statement, and I'm very happy also to say that just last week, we used the annual plenary meeting of the SAFI network to host a very lively consultation on the first draft of this outcome document. I'm pleased to mention this because I think it's been really interesting to broaden out the conversation beyond the public development bank community and to realize how strong an interest there is in the community among a broader set of players in the financial landscape around food and agriculture. Today we have the pre-summit event, and we are now in the process of collecting formal endorsement of the outcome document. So what I'm presenting now still is in the process of collecting formal signatures, but it is what the partners have agreed, the cluster members have agreed may be presented to you today. Then, of course, we will have the summit on the 11th and 12th of November. Next slide. The core rationale of the cluster coming together, of the outcome document, of the forum, I think lies in these four elements of a narrative that we've heard about throughout this event today. The first element is really a recognition of the importance of finance as a critical lever of transformation towards more sustainable and inclusive food systems. Finance is not all that is required, but it is, an entry point that can really have transformative potential. It just needs to be used purposely for that effect. Secondly, the importance of alignment. Again, it's a word we've heard from many panelists today. Here, the importance of alignment between different forms of public finance and different forms of private finance. I emphasize different forms of public finance as well, because in the conversation we've been having within the cluster, many have emphasized the need to also crowd in and deploy more climate or green finance, for example, alongside development finance in the sector. Third, the strategic role of PDBs in the space as real promoters of this alignment and facilitators of this alignment. And fourthly, the urgency, but also the opportunity around, the particular timeline that we're living, so the summit and the context in which it is taking place. Next slide. The outcome document has a preamble and it has a series of recommendations and commitments. So in the next 3 slides, I will summarize what is contained in these different parts of the document. The preamble recalls, again, the critical importance of investing in agriculture and the food economy to realize the 2030 Agenda and the Paris Agreement on climate change. For us who work in this domain, this is an obvious statement, but for the broader community, this is not necessarily the case. So there is an affirmation of the importance of the sector to the broader agenda of climate and the SDGs. Secondly, the emphasis on the need for a diversified financial ecosystem with different sources of finance, but also different types of financial flows. We just heard, for example, about the need for more early growth capital to be deployed in many economies to support the emergence of new companies, new business models. There is really a need for finance to be available at all stages in the growth of a new company, but also to address different types of investment needs in the sector. So again, this diversity of the needed ecosystem. Third, a recognition of the diversity of public development banks operating in the sector, but again, a recognition of their uniqueness. And that uniqueness really lies in their focus on addressing market failures, their counter-cyclical role, their capacity or expectation of greater risk-taking compared to others, and so forth. And fourth point, the capacity of public development banks to be really strategic enabler of this intersection of public good and private good around food and agriculture. What I put in red here is the fifth point of the preamble, that is where the public development banks within the cluster recognize a particular need to strengthen their capacity. That is particularly in the areas of mobilization and deployment of different sources of finance, including green finance. And the second is strengthening their capacity to crowd in, de-risk, mobilize private finance. These were also not by coincidence the two themes of the panels we just closed. Next slide. Coming now to the commitments and the recommendations of cluster members. First comes a commitment to increase their contribution to investing in agriculture and to doing so in a perspective of sustainable landscape and food systems. So not with a narrow sectoral perspective, but really with a transformative approach. Second is the emphasis on the importance of improved governance and improved regulatory environments that really enable PDBs to do their job or fulfill their mandates with respect to taking risk while remaining financially sustainable, but also to integrate this new, if you will, investment themes such as climate resilience, environmental sustainability, inclusion, nutrition impact, and so forth. Third, the importance of stronger approaches and better tools for financial risk management. We've heard about the importance of PDBs as facilitators of risk mitigation and risk management for other players in the financial ecosystem, but the PDB's own capacity to manage risk within the ecosystem is very much an area where cluster members think there is need for more attention. And one common theme in the conversation around this point has also been the need to better leverage what new technologies, particularly digital technologies and data system, can enable public development banks to do, to better assess risk, but also to better manage it. Fourth is a recognition of the need to revisit the toolkit, in terms of the financial offerings of public development banks to assess whether they really meet the needs, particularly of small scale enterprises in the sector, smallholders, youth, women. Are PDBs really offering, particularly those that are operating at the retail level, are they offering directly or indirectly what is needed for the lower end of the market to be able to thrive? And are they also equipped with the right suite of financial offerings to address investments in greener, more climate resilient practices. Next slide. We heard quite a bit about this, again, particularly in the previous panel, but there is an important recognition among cluster members about the need to also maybe modernize, strengthen, broaden what they offer in terms of financial investment products. Lots of interest in green bonds, but there's more than that. Quite a bit of discussion on alternative models of securitization. Really a need to strengthen the capacity of public development banks, particularly second tier, to mobilize finance for the market and to associate this finance to specific development impacts. 2 points related to collaboration and partnerships relate to a commitment to closer collaboration among public development banks, both those that are specifically focused on this sector and with a broader set of public development banks that work in different parts of the food system, which may include energy, infrastructure, different sectors that really need to work together for a transformative agenda, also for agriculture to be realistic. This emphasis is also quite important on closer dialogue with private investors. And in that context, a particular emphasis on the need to be better at sharing relevant data, learning, modeling viable investment models, and really committing to a complementary role that is focused on bringing additionality to the market and avoiding inadvertently crowding out or replacing or duplicating what the private sector can offer. And finally, last point, a commitment to continuing to work together to strengthen the capabilities of public development banks, including their own staff. So lots of interest in training, in skills development, in learning from each other about efficient and effective innovations. Let's move to the next slide. Just a brief idea of what is being discussed around a possible future public development bank working group on financing sustainable food systems. This may be a standalone forum, or it may be integrated in a platform that may result from the summit. But the idea is that it would serve around 6 functions. First, to be a space for members to track and discuss relevant developments in the sector, allowing dive-ins into specific themes of common concern. We've heard, for example, green bonds for agriculture projects being a possible example. Sharing and aligning around good practice, improving, through peer support, the practices that are adopted by different members. Given visibility to innovation, to really inspiring models. I think that the colleague from BNDES referred to the lights team within the PDB community. I think this is what the group would like to showcase and give space to. Nurturing collaborations and partnerships for actual projects, for actual investments, maybe for resource mobilization, maybe around new vehicles. And finally, again, facilitating this function of training of human capital, building the capacity through training. Next slide, which is also the final. Just a few thoughts about next steps. Again, the signature process is being completed at the moment. It should be completed by next week, ideally. Already, we have some supporters from outside the cluster that are asking if they can sign and endorse, which I think is an excellent. It's an excellent indication that that the cluster is really onto something exciting. There will be a high-level event that is hosted by IFAD at the summit on financing sustainable food systems, public development banks as catalysts of new investment models. And after the summit, the cluster will be working to flesh out, the features of this working group as parts of the process. So I would just like to close by saying, as the head of IFD said earlier this morning, and we started this event, this is really a start. So there is a lot of energy around this process, a lot of energy around also the document that I just briefly presented, but also a strong sense of expectation on the part of cluster members that there is a road ahead that we want to travel. This is not a coming together just for the sake of a summit. So yeah, that is all. Ron, back to you.
Thank you very much, Bettina. And ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the closure of our event today. I'm sure you'll agree that we've had some really interesting and inspiring discussions, and we've certainly, I think, identified some areas of future action. I want to assure you that we have a recording of the session, and we'll be keeping a full record of the chat as well, so we can follow up on any issues that have raised. Please also do feel free to reach out to us if there are any things that need following up after the discussions. Overall, the discussions today have really been a testament, I think, to the demand for continued dialogue and partnership, and also the identification of priorities. For example, we heard about the increasing importance of green and climate finance for agriculture and food systems and the important role of PDBs. We also heard about the importance of PDBs leveraging their positions to crowd in private finance, and also the role that they have in helping to align this finance with sustainability objectives. We also heard about the new ways of working and the potential partnerships that can occur between actors. And this, for us, is where the summit really helps in bringing us together, and where we would welcome continued collaboration as outlined by Bettina. We would, again, very much encourage all of you that are interested in working and contributing to shaping the next steps to reach out to us as we try and put forward the future directions. Let me extend my gratitude to the IFAD team, particularly led by Courtney, for their work in organizing the event. And finally, let me thank all of you for the time to join us today from all over the world. And we really do look forward to our continued collaboration, both in the lead up to the Financing in Common Summit, and perhaps more importantly, the work that happens after that. So be safe, and thank you very much.
Thank you also.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.